Hello, hello! I'm Kate, the crazy cat lady. Kate Sculpts. Today I decided to make a black cat with a pretty intense aura and disturbingly long tail. To you it might just look like fire, but I assure you this cat has some strange powers. I promise I didn't set it on fire. Anyways, let's just start the video. Now, the armature for such a long cat is quite simple. A long stick of foil. I use masking tape to hold together any stubborn pieces which don't want to join, and then I grab my true love, Super Sculpey, and whack it until it's soft and roll it out to create a thin base layer of clay. It's not important that this first layer is thick or smooth, because on top of it I will just be adding more clay to smoothen and bulk it out. I do use clay glue underneath the clay, as sometimes it doesn't like to hold onto the foil even when the foil itself has lots of texture and ridges in it, simply because the clay just isn't sticky enough, a problem Cosclay does not seem to have. Once I've smoothened all of the seams out, like I said, I just use thicker slabs of clay to enhance the shapes, like the thighs. As I make this, I know it's not very proportionate, but I wanted to style it almost in the same way one of those Egyptian cat statue things may look. That was a big point of inspiration for the cat's overall form. I then go and wrap some thinner metal wire around some thicker metal wire so that I can create texture on the thicker metal wire so that the clay will stick nicely to the thicker metal wire, which will be the legs, with thicker metal wire in it, if you didn't know, if I didn't say it already. The front legs I'm planning on making quite thin. You can be the judge of if they look thin by the end because of the extra fur texture on top of them, adding an extra bit of thickness. I wanted to make the midway leg joint, I guess the knees, very pointed like a fierce exaggerated calf, but ended up making it a lot less intense after realising it just wasn't really working as nicely as I'd hoped. I then go in with this pointed wool tool to scratch in a fur texture where the underside of the legs will be, where I will not be able to reach the fur detail that I usually do later on. I attach the legs side by side, trying to get them as equal as possible before making a quick trip up to the chest so I can add extra clay to build up its fluffiness. Using 2 little rolls of clay, I also add the bottom paws on, peeking out just from under those thighs. And of course I can't forget to split up each of the toes using the 2 flat-faced silicone tool. When making spikes, or claws in this case, the way I do it is adding 1 small ball of clay to your area, blending it in, then pushing the excess out to make a point. I usually use my favourite tool, this small metal flathead, but sometimes I create the point by pinching the clay, which you'll get to see later on. Back to the pointed ball tool, I scrape in more fur to the tops of the paws, one area which I will not be adding the curly fur onto. Here on my channel we have a few techniques that I have created which define my sculptures, almost like a technique signature of sorts. Of course I want other people to use these techniques, which is why I show them. For example, the moss I make. Very many of my sculptures include it, and it was something I decided to start doing after some experimenting. Another one of these Kate techniques is this fur. Again, I've used it lots in the past. How I do it is roll a tiny piece of clay out, bend it, place them on in rows and texture them. I try to make their directions sort of random, some pieces even being straight and other being super curly. I do admit when I first started making this technique, it wasn't great. It was very flat and honestly quite ugly, but now that I've enhanced it with the directional randomness, as well as making sure each tuft of fur isn't flat against the body, I think this technique really has developed well, although it is insanely time consuming and hard on the hands. Is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. Now we have 2 Kate techniques. Wonder what else we'll come up with. The next step is to make the tail. I start by rolling out a long line of Cosclay medium, making sure it's very thin but gets a little thicker at one end. I then cut it into more manageable segments and slice a slit down the middle to place onto a thin metal wire. I repeat while blending out all of the seams. As Cosclay is quite sticky after whacking to soften it, it attaches to the metal quite well without any clay glue. What I did next was place it into the oven. I'm aware that Cosclay can be bent very nicely after baking, but here's a warning of something unexpected that happened. I took it from the oven, bent it into shape, then put it back into the oven. While it can hold shapes when bent the first time, or even second or third, if you put it back into the oven after it has been bent when cured, it will split. a lot, so only bend it when you're done baking, if you ever plan on using Cosclay, that is. Back to the fur, why don't you try to guess how many of these curly furs there will be by the end? Take your guess in the comments. Oh great, I just set myself up to count all of them, didn't I? Alright, I'll count it and I'll put it at the end of the video so you can see just how many of these tiny little furs I had to do. I had to endure. My hands hurt. After that's finally over, I start working on the head, of course starting off with a foil ball, then layering clay over the top and bulking out specific areas like the cheeks and snout. Then using a variety of tools, mainly the flathead, I began to define the face. I had a bit of trouble with the form. For a while it looked like the face cats make when they go to the toilet. Back to the Cosclay, I make the ears. I failed the first time, as you can see. Doing it this way just made it too flat and I couldn't get its nice rounded form. I then tried again, this time rolling out two little peaks and slicing into them. This gave them a much nicer rounded out kind of shape. I really had to be as delicate as possible while removing all seams, as there's no armature underneath to help keep its form. I've done ears in the past of course, but I think this is the first really successful attempt due to this new way I approached it. Keeping your mind open to experimenting, knowing you could fail is good. That one success will make the 100 fails worth it. To attach the ears I do add extra clay to blend it out, and I've got to say the inside of the ears were blended so smoothly that it was tempting to just leave them as they were, but I didn't. I texture the insides of the ears quite simply like I did on the paws earlier, and then back to the dreaded but scrumptious curly fur. I only had 3 layers per ear, so it wasn't too hard I suppose. Earlier when making the cat's claws, I mentioned there's another way to make slightly larger spikes. Again, placing a ball of clay on, blending it out so it's a mound on the face here, and then I go in, pinch and pull. Not too hard, but enough to give it a point. It's very useful, but it's best to stick with the other method in crowded areas as it may be hard for your fingers to reach. I'd say that's kind of the limit at how close they should be. I then give him a sort of curly quiff in the centre of his head, a very curly piece of hair similar to how I did some of them on the body, but very sparsely. I didn't want all of them to be this curly, but I just decided to give him a little bit of hair on the front of the face here. And then a very basic texture back with the pointed ball tool. I scratch in lines into the face to make it fluffy. I need to take care so that the lines are in the correct direction, that they would fall on a cat's face. As I said at the beginning, this cat has a fiery aura about it, so I'm making 2 moulds to create a fire look. I make the ends squiffy and the main shape swirly, and really there's no sort of pattern I'm following here. The pointed silicone tool was my best bet for making swirly and squishy looking lines, not directly looking like fire as that's not the goal, but inspired by fire. After baking them, I make a hot glue mould. It won't be perfect, but it'll be good enough. As hot glue is, well, hot, I let it cool down while giving the cat some whiskers. I bake some Cosclay, bend it slightly, then secure them onto the snout, 5 on each side, 2 at the back and 3 at the front. Once the mould is done, I mix some epoxy resin up in 3 colours, a blinding yellow, an orange and a red. The yellow on the inside, working up to the red on the outside. I don't use resin all that often, so forgot to put on gloves. Don't be me because I am an idiot. I did wear a mask though with proper ventilation. Once the finishing red is poured, I go in with this sort of pointed tool and just blend it out to give it a sort of swirly look. That's going to take a while to dry, so while I wait, I work on finishing up the body. I attach the head on with clay glue as a precaution, and a line of clay to work as the neck. Blending into cured clay can be annoying, but with the use of clay softener it can make it almost seamless. I do just need to finish off the curly squirly whirly furs around the neck before moving on to making a tiny crow skull. I roll it into a cone shape and place the thick end on a ball tool to round it out for the head. I also make sure the underside of the beak is hollow as well. As it's tiny and contains no armature whatsoever, it's very fiddly, but I just about manage, and also make a swirly leather necklace to hold it around the neck as well, just by kind of flattening out some clay and twirling it. To hold the skull in place, I did have to hook the necklace through the crow's eye sockets, which was annoying, but luckily it turned out great. Back to the tail, this was when I bent it so it split when in the oven. My idea for this was to be a summoning circle of thorns, as the cat is, yes, a witch. So I wrapped the baked clay around itself, making it look like vines and not a tail, but that's the goal here, as strange and random as it may be. I never said my ideas were normal, okay? I then just place it into the cat's butt. Wow, this video is jam-packed with new ideas, huh? I did not want to create each spike like the methods I mentioned earlier. Secret third method unlocked. I mixed liquid super Sculpey, which is pretty much the same as clay glue, with Cosclay to make this super sticky substance. I touched it and it was near impossible to get off. I scoop some up onto the flathead tool and slowly splodge it on and then slowly draw back until it detaches, making an adorable little spike. Or thorn in this case. Surprisingly, after it's baked, they were actually quite sharp. I ended up pricking myself a few times while painting it. Talking about painting, let's paint! As you know, this is a black cat, but although it may look perfectly black, there is some brown mixed in there to make it just a little warmer. Molly has brown patches now that she's getting old. No matter how much I watered down the paint, it was still hard as ever to get it right into all of those gaps between the fur. Yet another reason why that technique is a pain in my behind. But with care and time, lots of time, I filled in all of those gaps. My bigger paintbrush didn't work as well, so I ended up going in with a little tiny brush and had to paint each gap individually. Yes, it was painful on both the body and the mind. As the tail is mostly a flat surface, I made sure that my paint was watered down enough to avoid creating streaks, another reason I prefer textured clay to untextured. Now for a little intermission, but not really because it's still running in the background. My sister has recently started photography and she is really good at it. She takes pictures of my sculptures sometimes as well, but a lot of nature photos. But yeah, she has an Instagram, Grace Point of View, so go check it out and show her some love. She does my thumbnail photos sometimes, which is just awesome. I also have an Instagram account where sometimes I post updates on what I'm doing with little sneak peeks. Anyways, back to your irregularly scheduled programming. Using dry brushing, I gently whack my paintbrush over the fur with a lighter brown to highlight all of that scrummy detail, and also painting the nose and inside the ears that same colour too. The whiskers I wanted to be silver to stand out and look nice against the black body. As for all metallics, black works best as an undercoat for silver. The colour of bone can vary, but I like it when it's a yellowish brown, so I do a coat of off-white for the base, then a wet wash of this yellowy brown on top to make it look old and weathered, making sure not to go too overboard. Also, a crow has a black beak which looks a little hard to see against the black body, but with a dark grey I can make it stand out. Of course, also the leather necklace is brown all over. I wanted the thorns to match the fiery eyes, so using another blinding yellow I paint all of them, gently blending them out. And then I blend in red on top to give it its gradient and I guess to make them look like little fire thorns. I've used a not so great airbrush before, but now I have a decent one, so let's put it to the test. I want the face to glow around the eyes, so I spray some red down, even gently getting the whiskers, then an orange, more centered, and a yellow in a small amount right in the middle. I do end up adding white, but it's a little too much, so I had to fix it. And the final touch is to glue on the fiery eyes of the witch cat. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's always fun to randomly make something with little sense behind it. It's a great way to experiment, I guess. Of course, I made the community post, but I'll add it here. Congratulations to GothicGeek92 for winning the commission giveaway. Make sure to send me a message on Instagram within the next week or so, otherwise I might have to re-roll the winner, but I doubt that'll happen anyways. I tried my very best to count the amount of fur on the cat, but I got about 912, give or take 50 or so. In the future I definitely need to make more cats, but in the meantime, leave me a suggestion on what to make next. Someone suggested a sculpture on the dark crystal last video, and I'm surprised I haven't already done one honestly, so I'm eager to make something from that film sometime soon. I'm planning to get a video out next Friday, but don't hold me to that, you know me. I used to be so good at deadlines, but there's so much in my way now. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more like this, a subscribe would be greatly appreciated. As always, I'm so grateful for your support, whether you choose to stay another day or not. Hopefully I'll see you lot next time, and happy sculpting, you crazy cats. Ta-ta!